Everyone, my name is Juan de Dios Mora. I'm an artist and educator. I want to thank Janet for being here today, for Cultivarte, for inviting me to be part of this amazing talk and conversation, for actually putting all this together. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Mexico. When I was 14 years old, I immigrated to the United States. But going back a little bit to Mexico, in Mexico, I was raised in a ranch, just working in the farms, working with my dad every day in the fields. It really helped me to develop a little bit the love for the arts. When my dad used to water the plants or the chiles, la matas de chile, so I used to walk through the surcos, and basically all the water who actually soaked in a little bit. With that, I used to sculpt little things. You know, I used to sculpt little houses, little cars, little guns, but it's something I really enjoy. I will say middle school, I started to draw. My love, my passion for the pop culture, such as the Power Rangers, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, really started to spark my love for the art. High school, I experienced that in Laredo. Now, actually, this is the United States. In Laredo, basically sparked more of my, creative process. But also, it was a culture shock for me just moving from Mexico to Laredo, not knowing English. English basically was, at that time, my second language. And I started to actually go into English classes, ESL classes to be specific. That's what actually I started to really understand a little bit of politics and the disadvantages that, growing in Mexico with an education is a little bit different, especially living in a ranch with the resources they're not that vast. So the United States is starting to learn more about the political discrimination, a little bit more about English, and of course, the art. Los artistas grandes, such as the canon of artists. Basically, I learned those in my college years. And I'm really happy to say during my college years, I went to Laredo Community College. It's actually Laredo College, I think now. And there I started to actually take art classes. And that's what actually, started to be more passionate for the arts. And then from Laredo Community College, I went to TAMIU, where actually I can say, and I'm really happy to say that I met this wonderful professor, Janet Krueger, who she encouraged me to go for the pre-making. I don't know why. That was my first time, taking a pre-making class. And Janet encouraged me to move to San Antonio, go to UTSA, meet with Dennis Olson, which sadly to say, he passed away a couple of years ago, but also to meet with Ken Rush, which both of them, they were really great mentors, Dennis and Ken. But, another great mentor, that I don't want to put it to the side, it was Janet Krueger. She actually gave me everything. I remember I used to walk into her office. It was full and packed with art. And that really sparked my my love for the arts more, because at that time, whenever when you're a student, you feel like, hey, there's probably just the Power Rangers, the Ninja Turtles. That's the only thing that exists out there. But Janet showed me how to actually love, the arts on a different level. It's not so much about the pop culture, about the creative process and how the creative process can be applying to the arts. And of course, do something amazing. Janet, sorry for the long intro.
I'm just like, is he talking about me? While all this is going on, it's like, really? I did all that, and I'm so honored that you feel that way about the impressions you have of our exchanges while you were at TAMIU, because it seems like it was such a brief time. I don't really remember. It's hardly more than a year, was it?
No, it was basically a semester, one full semester in the summer.
Yeah, well, I know. And I'm just saying, it didn't seem like you were there for very long. I remember almost every single print you made in the printmaking class and thinking, I wish I had some of those prints. And then, and then it was like, zoom, off you went to San Antonio. And while I'm listening to your story of, coming from Mexico up to Laredo and San Antonio, I realized how bizarre our relationship is, even more so in that I did exactly the reverse of what you did. I started in San Antonio. That's where I grew up. I was a suburban girl. I lived in a suburban neighborhood. I went to all the same schools in the school district where I grew up. Like right around the corner from where I lived was the middle school, and up the street from where I lived was my elementary school. And I had art classes all the way through elementary school, middle school, and high school. And then my mom was an artist. I don't think she thought of herself as an artist. She just was one of those kind of people who was compelled to paint every day or make something every day, all the time. She was a housewife. She did work for a very brief period of time, but mostly she stayed home and made stuff all the time. And then we lived right down the street from the McNay Art Museum. We were about, less than a mile from the McNay. So we were frequently there. There was an art school at the McNay that was in what was previously the potting sheds for the what's her name? Marion Kugler McNay. And the art classes were taught in the potting sheds. They were just buildings with glass. It's like a nursery. That's where the classes were. Much later, there was a whole nother, all that was torn down and another school was built on the property there, much more modern. I had great hopes of going there. It was going to be kind of like the Southwest School of Arts in San Antonio.
Yeah.
And anyway, that all was like, right where I lived. I left after high school. I went to Austin and took a year's worth of classes there, enrolled as an art student. And I hated every minute of it. I hated the students. I couldn't even get into any of the studio classes as a freshman. I got enrolled into life drawing classes by mistake. I wasn't supposed to be, because they were an elevated junior, senior class level class with the guy, I don't know if you're familiar with his name, Charles Umlauf. He was a sculptor and he taught the figure drawing class. And I took the classes with him, even though I wasn't supposed to. They enrolled me for it. What did I know? I was a freshman. But then the only other classes I took were art history classes. And I loved them. And I loved everything about my art history classes and my art history professors. So during that time, I left every year, took art classes at San Antonio College and loved those classes. I took classes with Mel Casas.
Yeah.
He was one of my teachers at SAC. My mom was pretty good friends with Alberto Mijangas. And so I knew him, and we went art openings all the time, all the way through from my youth into, through as long as my mom was, functioning. We would go to art openings all around San Antonio. I went back to school after a couple of years hiatus of not going. I went to San Antonio College, and then I went back to UT in Austin because I loved all my art history classes, and I still couldn't get into any studio classes. And I thought, well, what the heck? I'll just change my major and become an art history major. And that's what I did. I graduated as a BFA in art history. And it was a little bit more advanced because I had so many studio hours. So it was a little bit more of it wasn't just a BA in art, it was a BFA in art history. So that was kind of my scholarly background, so to speak. Then after I finished school in Austin, I became, I was looking for a job. I'm like, what do you do with an art history degree, right? I didn't know. I had no clue as to what. I was walking around downtown Austin one day and I stumbled across the offices of the Texas State Arts Commission office. It's just like a little tiny door with that said on it. And I said, I wonder what that is. I don't know anything about it, but it says art on it, so I'll go in. And I went in, and there was a man sitting at a desk with his head in his hands like this. And I walked in and I said, so like, y'all have any jobs available for a recent graduate? And he said, are you an art student? And I said, well, kind of. I'm an art history graduate, but I took a lot of studio classes. And he said, could you move to Bryan, Texas? And I said, well, when and why? Why would I do that? Which is where, right next door to College Station, where A&M is. And he said, because we need immediately we needed artists to fulfill a residency that another artist just bailed on in the middle of the school year. He said, I need someone to go there like tomorrow. You can go and interview the Board of Education for the school district there in College Station. And I said, yeah, I can go. So I went to that week, piled into my car, drove up to College Station, interviewed with the school board. And I think I completely blew them away because I went up there in my overalls and a t-shirt, and I had a sketchbook, and I drew all the board members sitting around the table while we were talking to them. And they were like, okay, that looks really cool. And you're hired. And I was the artist in residence to the College Station Independent School District for a year and a half, because I had to finish out the one half, and then I did the whole next year. Even now, they don't do year-long residencies. I guess they figure that it just makes people insane. So I did that as an artist. They gave me a studio, and I only had to be in the classroom with the students for like, I don't know, 6 hours a week. And the rest of my time was to be spent in my studio creating. It was the most amazing thing that I just haphazardly fell into and did for a year and a half. I guess I have to leap forward there to where I met and married my husband, who lived on a ranch in Ensenada. So here I am doing the opposite of what you did. You know, I went from a suburban thing to this place that was in the middle of nowhere, 40 miles north of Laredo. I can remember before we married, and my husband was like being a rancher, also not renowned for its income and you know, like what anybody of that age at that time would be interested in doing. and I said, well, you know, I can make art. And he said, well, do you think you can make, you know, an income with your art? And again, I lied and said, yeah, sure. Of course I can make an income doing art. I said, can you make an income being a rancher? And he said, well, I think so. And so off we went. And so I had this sort of split identity between San Antonio and Ensenada, which is the little town near where I live, and Laredo, where I ultimately went, because of course you can't make money as an artist just by yourself. I mean, unless you're just, I guess, you know, Basquiat or something, I don't know. You can't. And so I had to find work. I didn't even know what universities or anything were in Laredo, but I discovered, you know, Laredo Community College, went down there, talked to the person there who also hired me on the spot without even looking at anything that I had done, and to teach basically full time. But I didn't have an MFA. So ultimately I couldn't stay. That was something that they said, well, you can teach part-time, you can be an adjunct professor, but you can't teach full-time as a permanent faculty member, as a professor. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess so. And then I guess about early or mid 90s rolled around, and we were in one of our perpetual droughts, and Georgia's cattle business wasn't doing very well, and I wasn't really selling a lot of things. I realized that, you know, at that point we had 2 children that I could project forward and see that I was going to need to put them into college sometime soon. I said, I need to go back to school. And Tammy U was just opening, and they had an art department. It blew me away. I couldn't even believe that they had an art department. I went down there and they hired me again. I showed you a little page of slides. Here's my work. And the dean of the college said, oh, well, those are fabulous. You're hired. And there I was, the only faculty member in the art department.
You having this, you know, charisma, this, you know, energy, all these things that, you know, reflects really good on you. And that's your character too, as well, you know. And I think that, you know, you finding these opportunities, it's not just a matter of luck. It's about you really put the time and effort into that. It is something that it was reflecting me as a student, you know. It's not like, I mean, probably you can confirm this right now, But I remember I used to bother you all the time. I was like, Professor Krueger, can you help me here? Can you? And by the way, during that time, my English was pretty bad, and you really, really, helped me a lot, with the English and stuff like that. And I remember you're like, hey Juan, you want to apply to UTSA? I can help you. But I remember walking to your office, and you had this beautiful energy that still till now I still respect, and I really love from you. And it's something that there's a lot of stuff that I feel like the relationship between you being a professor, a mentor, and me being a student. I mean, we have a beautiful relationship. It's something that I treasure, and it's something that I can say, you really changed a lot in my life. It's not so much about, I don't want to say I was your favorite student during that time, but I was the one who used to nag you all the time, and I
Yeah.
remember you have so much energy for me, and I really appreciate it. So probably that is reflected in your, whenever you walk into a space, your personal, like this beautiful energy comes from you, and everyone is gonna like you. If not, let me know. I can talk to them.
Well, I have to say that I guess I remember what you're saying, but from my teacher's point of view, that was my first full-time job as a professor in a university. In my understanding, which has always been my understanding of any job that I had, if someone's going to pay you to do something, you bring that energy to it because that's what your job is.
Mhm.
And what you're saying is, well, I, as a professor, showed you attention that you perhaps weren't accustomed to getting. At the same time, I was getting from you what most professors don't often see, which is a student who is enthusiastic and interested and curious and wanting to know. I have all this wealth of information that I'm anxious to give to anybody. And at the same time, the majority of students are really not interested. They don't want to know, they don't care. They just want to get out of there and do their time and make their grade, because at that point, we didn't have any art majors. We did not have students who were dedicated to becoming artists. And so when I found a student like you who was, you know, obviously anxious and dying for that information, it's like, you can't turn me off. I'm just like gushing with information. Sure, I always have to ask people that say, shut me up, if I'm becoming too overwhelming, if I'm giving you too many options, if I'm giving you too much information before your head explodes. But that's what I appreciated about you as a student, was your desire for what I was able to give you. Limited though it was, because I am not a printmaker. And
Oh, you're not a printmaker. You seem like, I remember taking the printmaking class, Tommy, I remember we did an exchange of prints, and one print that really, because I mean, I can tell you, in my college years, projects, they were just projects. But I remember going to Tommy U, we used to have like really more intense critiques. I mean, it was a small group too, students as well. But I remember there, you challenged me. You put one question that I still use to today. I don't remember the other student, but there's one student who was doing something that it was something weird and different. When I say another issue that doesn't really pertain, to the United States or to his personal life, it was something completely different. And you're like, well, I'm gonna ask you a question. You were asking the student, every time when you wake up in the morning, what is the first thing you worry about? Do you worry about anime? Do you worry about all this stuff? Why you don't reflect that in your artwork? That, it really helped me a little bit in my artwork, since, that day, I started to put, see all this stuff into perspective. Because, I was doing, kind of like a Southwest art, a little bit like a more popular culture art, stuff like that. And since there, I started to be like, okay, I need to actually do something that relates to my culture. And I started to ask my dad, hey, dad, you had any dichos? And he was like, yes, mijo, I had this one. Because during that time, we were working in a project about dichos. That was my first, relief ever. After I took your class, a lot of things, starting to kind of arise, questions, concepts, different type of mentality? Should I be doing more that is actually something popular or something that relates to my culture, to my ethnicity? So the deal is, because of your class, because of that project, I did a Mexican dicho. From there, I basically, I started to embrace more my art. But I was still way lost, I can tell that. So when I moved to San Antonio, I went to a show called San Antonio Mero Hueso, which Vicente Valdez and Alex Rubio had. Like, it was this beautiful museum. It was my first time going to a main, no museum, it was Museo Alameda during that time. There was a lot of artwork laying around, and I was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. This is not so much the space that impacted me, it was the content. Alex Rubio and then Vicente Valdez, they were speaking from the heart and about the culture. And from there, that really reinforced my love to actually speak about my culture even more. Sometimes, if you're not impacted in a way, or you're not being told how to actually, work with your concepts, you're gonna be lost. During that time, I can say that you sparked that little thing from my love for my culture. The deal is, going to, galleries, talking to professors, talking to artists, and see different artwork can really, really give you that opportunity to explore other concepts.
I'm glad that you had that positive experience, and it's a rare treat to get that feedback from a student. I think back to those art classes that I took way, way, way back. The figure drawing classes with Charles Umlauf were the most meaningful classes for me. And ever since, they've been that way. And I seek out those classes so that, because to me, it's more of a meditative process than a technical thing. Sometimes when I go to Austin in the past, when I've had a lot of time to spend in Austin, they have a lot of, there's little classes and all kinds of things all over town all the time. And you can just sign up online and go to them. And so there's about 5 or 6 different art figure drawing classes where you can just go and draw. Everybody puts their $10 in the basket for the model, and nobody teaches, everybody just draws. That's, for me, that's like being in heaven, because I don't have that opportunity very much at all in Laredo. There's just such a thing. No one's told me about it. Having that are true art students who are truly invested in their own development as artists is a rare treat for probably any art professor or teacher. It's not something you run across. I remember, I don't know why this always springs into my mind. Before the degree was put together at the university at TAMU. And so I had students from all different disciplines taking an art class because they were required to. One young man was an engineering student. I think that no matter what I did, it wasn't a very good experience for him because he didn't like it that there weren't any rules. He was taking a painting class, and so I don't really know. I don't think I was at that point realizing the disparity in students who don't know anything about art and students who do know about art. And so when I had him in the class and I was trying to teach them very basic things, color wheels, things like that, how to mix paints to get the color you wanted, he was like, just tell me how much of each of these colors I'm supposed to use. And I said, I can't tell you anything like that because there is no such thing. And he said, well, there must be, there has to be. Every discipline has its rules. And I said, well, art's one of them that doesn't. So you're kind of on your own on this. I can tell you that, red and yellow will make orange, and blue and yellow will make green, and blue and red will make purple. But there's about 15,000 different colors of blue, and each of those, and 15,000 colors of red. And so depending on which of those colors you put together, you're going to get a different color. And he was like outraged. It was like beyond him how any discipline could function without rules that were concrete and unchanging. He was my biggest failure of being able to reach a student who did not have any kind of concept of art at all, whether it had to do with why people did what they did or how they did what they did. It was all a mystery to him, and he was completely lost. So I felt badly about that.
There's gonna be sometimes students that, you don't know how to approach to them. Probably they need somebody else to explain it a different way, but then we're gonna have
Yes,
students
yes.
like that. But changing the topic a little bit, the whole residency with Cultivarte is basically I propose to do a series of luchadores wearing a headdress, and the headdress is basically based on an animal. The luchadores that I'm using is not the ones for popular cultures. They completely made up the characters spiritually, or you want to put it that way. There's always a connection with something that you relate to nature. You live in,
Yeah.
in Encinal, basically you living with the wildlife. And for me, living a ranch, the wildlife, it was so important to us. I mean, you love and hate the wildlife. It depends what kind of destruction they do into your property. The wildlife is something so important. Me growing in Laredo, everyone talking about deers, javelinas, and all this stuff, really, affected me in the good way. One thing that I actually, I want to talk about this one specific animal, the coyote. I use it a lot, in my artwork to reflect free nature that they have to just wander around. Yes, of course, they're territorial as well, But I think when you're talking about in the border, cities, when you talk about coyote, you're gonna talk about smugglers, and that's the reason sometimes, I use this type of animals to, give it a change, or to actually, put it into context when it comes to the social, type of issues. And I think, El Coyote for me, it means a lot. It depends what kind of meaning do you want to give to that specific symbology. Like I said, the Coyote for me is something that you have no boundaries. You have no restrictions. You can wander around. You can love what you do. You can actually cross the border without papers. El Coyote, I feel like this animal can go and walking around, within this imaginary line is divided Mexico and United States. But in a different context, El Coyote is a smuggler, and I want to reinforce that idea, it's not so much of me coming from the small town, such as Laredo, now it's bigger, but me talking a little bit about what we have to experience every day. You have one friend who's like, oh, I have somebody who can cross people. And you're like, you have to stay quiet about that, I think symbology is important for my artwork. And then also, my community is important for my artwork. When I say my community, I'm talking about the Latino community, but my dad, he's the one who actually, he was another role model in my life. He was the one who was trying to fix something. He used a piece of wood, put it there and patch it, boom, 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 boom. And there you go, fixed. So because of that, I started to actually work a little bit my concepts, how to customize things with random stuff. My concept, it always reflects, where I come from. These type of stories that we talk every day in the community with my family, with my friends. And then me being this, I guess, I don't want to say second generation because I was born in Mexico, but I'm more open-minded to have any type of a talk about different type, topics. It could be religion, it could be political, anything that really, affects the community. And that really helps me a lot to put it into my artwork, not to be afraid to put symbology that somehow relates to a specific group or a specific ideology or symbology. And that is really, allow me to actually, bring something fresh to the table, which a lot of people, they're afraid to do, to disturb or to do something to specific groups because they want to respect them, but there's ways to actually implement an idea or use an idea in your artwork. It's just a matter of, be respectful, be creative too, because you don't want to be, like direct and basically slap somebody unless you're doing political, art or activist, art or propaganda art. And then Sinali basically is, you have a beautiful studio for nature. I think nature is reflected in your artwork and it's so beautiful. The way you use colors is something that I really fall in love with your paintings.
Well, let me address, it's interesting because when you talk about how you present yourself, whether it's political or whether it's just your interior discussion with yourself about how the things you think about. And so you overlap these things and you, like you say, it's like you don't want to slap someone in the face, and which is what political art is, supposed to do, slap somebody in the face. And yet at the same time, you and I are alike that way. For the longest time, most of my artistic career, the imagery that I used, that it had an impact, and it was usually related to my life. More recently, and over a period of time, I've done a very few, very small pieces that were related to the people that would be coming through our ranch, the people on foot who came from across, and they would come through. they'd stop at the house, they'd want something to drink, something to eat, and want to know where they were and how to get someplace else. And those were the three things they would want. And those were the things that we would help them with when they came through. And, oh, the highway's over here and the train tracks are over there and Houston is another 100 miles that way. And so I've done a very few, less than 10, I would think, maybe little tiny paintings based on my experiences with people that would come through. And when you talked about the coyote, it made me think, because I did one painting, a very small painting of a group of people standing behind a barbed wire fence, cactus all behind them, little children, older women, younger women, men, and one guy with dark glasses on and a backpack. And he was the coyote. He was the one who sort of presented himself to me when I met him across the fence and told me what they wanted to know. And I helped them find, get to where they wanted to get to. And so that painting of all those people looking at me, wanting me to direct them in the quickest, best way possible to get where they wanted to go. I titled it El Coyote because he was sort of in the front and he looks different from the other people. But later in my mind, I just decided to call it El Monte. People had appeared out of the brush. They were stopped by a fence. They were encountered by a person who, an Anglo woman who, was just there as a signpost. I could have been doing this and, how to get where you want to go. And here's, a bag full of, tortillas and beans or whatever that I had available, fruit usually, and eggs. And so there was this exchange, a visual exchange. I didn't want to make this into a big political statement. I wanted people to receive it the way I presented it, which is, this is what happened. But when I say that, I realized that I didn't really show these paintings to anybody. I didn't want to show them to anybody because I felt like I was the intruder and that I didn't have a right to present this image from my point of view. And I expressed this to a friend of mine fairly recently, a printmaker, by the way. I don't know if you know him, Eric Avery, who lives in San Ignacio. He's a very famous printmaker, actually. Oh, and wow. he's one of the kind of people who slaps you across the face with his prints. He came out and to my studio and I showed him these little paintings I had done. And he said, "These are fabulous. Why aren't you showing these?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I didn't feel like it was my story to tell." And he said, "Well, of course it's your story to tell. It's your story because it's happening to you. You need to present this." And that's what you're doing. You have ideas, you have images, and you're just trying to make sense of what you experience.
I'm not sure I'm speaking with a truth behind this. There's no rules, when it comes to art. And I'm gonna add something to that. Basically, art is really subjective. It's like my character cannot please everyone. The same thing with art. And I favor things that basically needs to be changed and need to be addressed. I don't have nothing against that. If I'm doing something, it's because that is basically comes from my heart. If I'm speaking of something, that is going to reflect who I am. I'm kind of like a goofy person sometimes. I'm more serious other times. I'm mean sometimes. But the deal is, in the art world, there's no rules. We don't want to live in this type of rules or this dictatorship where everything has to be political. We need all types of art. There's some art that I really, I don't care for. I still, I show appreciation for that. I still analyze it and give some critical, formal analysis. But the deal is, there's gonna be some stuff out there, that I feel like it's really good. There's so many people gonna say that's really bad, And the deal is, at the end of the day, we can actually apport something to the creative process, to a culture, to the arts that basically is gonna make it wonderful, And the deal is, for me, propaganda or activist perspective is not everything for me. I still do some of that stuff on my artwork, but it's not 100% me.
Well, I think, like in many pursuits, what you strive for and what people recognize is authenticity.
Yes.
That if it's something that you're doing just because you know it's gonna sell and make a lot of money for you, but isn't something that you are invested in emotionally and intellectually, then people know that. People can tell that when they see it.
Mhm.
And those probably those kind of art forms that you yourself maybe don't find as appealing as others. But the point is that authenticity in your own work is something that only you can speak to and other people can recognize.
Mhm.
And I think that when people look at your work, and I tend to think that that's what makes my work successful, is that I am, deeply rooted in it and deeply invested in the interrogation of in my own mind of what it is I am trying to do with my art and how I want to present it. That's where the rewarding part of being an artist can come from, is knowing that other people can look at your work and say, that guy knows what he's talking about.
One thing that I, keep telling all my students, you feel it from your heart, like you say, it's rooted, between, within you, go for it, There's certain subjects that I restrict that in my classes, but the deal is, there's some students, they're doing some art that I feel like, try something different. What about the content is creative? Are you being challenged? Doing research about putting how you're going to put all that research into your artwork? So the deal is all these things, they need to be reflected in your artwork. And they were like, oh, my art is everything. Of course, it's everything. But, one thing we need to figure out is what kind of audience or groups is going to love your artwork. Because you go into this idea that everyone is going to love your artwork out there, you're completely wrong. And you have to be, you have to be okay with that. One time I'm going to tell a story, Janet. It was one of my professors from my UTSA, days. She actually went to one of my shows, that I have a solo show, and I was an undergrad, I think. No, I'm sorry, it was a grad student. I was a grad student. And then she actually walks into the show, checks every single piece, and I was selling this calendar. And I approached her, like, hey, do you love my artwork? And she's like, I don't know. Like, I was like, what do you mean you don't know? It's like, it's like, and she really have a huge respect for me because, my work ethics and the energy that I put into my artwork. She's like, Juan, I'm going to tell the truth, your artwork is amazing, but it's not for me. I was like, okay. And then that time, I got upset, but then later went to my place at night and the next day analyzed that, basically I'm the same way. When I walk into a gallery, probably there's going to be a lot of stuff that I don't like, and that's completely fine. There's nothing wrong about it. After that, that was a lesson in my life that actually, was like, I'm glad that this professor told me that. Basically, now I'm the same way. I walk into a galleries, and I mean, subjective, everything is subjective. So I go with just a critical eye, and then saying, okay, let's just have fun,
I agree entirely with that. And I think that it's hard for young people, really young people, like these young ones were. It's like when you say, do something that you're invested in or that you're interested in, they don't know what they're interested in. They're young people. They haven't lived enough life to know what. Yes. Yes, but they don't, that's as far as they've gotten. They're still like babies, they haven't been out in life and experienced what's going on.
Janet, just to put, your comment into perspective, basically, one thing that I told the students, they live in a golden age right now because we live in a current time, and every time we live in a golden age is basically, that's the place where you want to be at, right? Technology, social media, and all this stuff. A lot of people, they go into Instagram and check other, artists' artwork. Soon, right now, we having this beautiful conversation. You're in Ensenada, where I'm in San Antonio partying like a rock star. And of course, we have other people in different places, But the deal is, having students to think about their artwork is basically walking into a gallery and see what the people that put in way too much time, when I say way too much time into the artwork, was being accepted into this gallery. I mean, there's different types of galleries, of course, there's the ones, a little bit more like profit, non-profit. Of course, you have museums with there's different type and different type of museums, And the beautiful thing about going into an institution, of course, you're paying for your education, is that they have shows there. It's walking distance. Janet, you know how hard it is for me to tell the students, Okay, at 6 o'clock and it's 5:45, the classes ends at 5:45. Can you guys walk to the gallery? It's 100 feet. You see just one student from the whole class walking to the gallery, and the rest, God bless America, you know? And the deal is, you know, being exposed to art, that really helps you to actually understand what's out there, knows what is being accepted, you know, because art is a revolution. It changes. It's something that, you know, everyone can express whatever they want to do into their artwork.
Well, you know, what I used to tell my students, because I hear what you're saying, the painfulness of not getting students out to look at art. I used to say, you know what, going and looking at art is like the best date ever. You can get free cheese and crackers and sausages on little sticks,
Water,
and free glasses of wine.
water.
And you just walk around and you don't have to say anything. You don't have to try and look smart. All you have to do is just look, and you can go with a date. So why not go, you know, because it's free. You just walk in the door and leave whenever you feel like it. You know, a date option. And even that didn't make too much sense. But I think over time at TAMU, we managed to get more students, because yes, our gallery was just down the hall. What's your excuse for not going?
Like I remember walking through the, you know, the first floor, the stairs, like the entrance.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember, you know, and I always wanted to be in those walls, you know.
Yeah.
I wanted to be, you know, want my artwork to be somehow exhibited, you know, not to be accepted, because at that time I didn't know so much about acceptance, you know. I mean, right now, you know, I don't want to talk about acceptance. Like we say, you know, there's a lot of people that, you know, probably they don't like my artwork, which I'm completely fine with, you know. It's just my goals, to my determination to have some pieces in them, you know, in galleries, no museums, okay? Because museums, you know, me getting to Smithsonian, that's a different type of topic. I wasn't expecting that, you know, but I feel so accomplished when I say, you know, hey, all this work, me staying all the way to 4 o'clock in the morning, me sweating in the garage, me working this, me giving up all the things, this is paying off. I was so excited, you know. My parents, they didn't know what the Smithsonian Museum is. I didn't know. I remember I got the letter, hey, Juan, congratulations, you know. And then I went to the internet to see if this is the museum, like the Smithsonian Museum, or there's different types of Smithsonians.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, what is this? What is going on? There's things in your life that you have control of, you know? Going into, you know, a museum, going to a gallery, putting time into your artwork, later is gonna pay off, you know. Probably, you know, like you and I, you know, probably we can agree. But I'm not gonna make a living of this. But something that I wanted to do is to actually leave a history here. If I mean, it's like a saying, you know, that I always say to my students, you know, if you go to the program, if you're flying, if you never land, you're not accomplishing anything. You're always gonna be flying. You're gonna think you're the best, but you're not the best. You need to land and later go back into the sky if you want to. But the deal is, if you never land, you don't see the perception of reality. All these things that's gonna help you to actually, you know, grow as an artist. You're never gonna let yourself to grow. You're never gonna actually write history. Because how are you gonna write history? You know, basically put into kind of like this type of metaphor. When you land your airplane, the tires is gonna make a mark on the pavement. It could be whatever land, whatever. It's gonna make a mark. That's the way you make marks. Whenever you're flying around, you're not gonna make a mark. You know,
That's a wonderful analogy.
the deal is once you graduate, you're on your own, and this is the reality that, I mean, it hits everyone. I want to tell the students, go to art shows to see. That's the main thing. Go art shows, go to museums, go to, you know, type of workshops when they're free. There's a tons of free workshops, you know, lectures, artist talks, you know, even contact artists and do studio visits.
I agree with all those things. It's the informing young students who maybe don't have the kind of same background that I had, you know, and a mother and a dad who took me to museums and things like that. Because yes, to encourage them that no one is going to expect you when you walk in the door of a museum or a gallery to open up and talk about it. I think that was one of the things that I found students were like nervous about. What do I do when I get there? You know, is someone going to expect something of me when I get there? And I said, no, all you're expected to do is look at what's on the wall, and you can keep your mouth shut. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to express an opinion. All you there is to look at it and observe it and think about it. That's all you need to do. And I think that was a real hard concept for them. They thought they had to have some sort of secret knowledge to go and look at art, because
Yeah.
they were expected to be able to talk about it to somebody.
All the human beings can relate and can describe art. The only thing, we don't have the terms. Some of the people not in the arts, they don't have the terms, but they
Right.
can still identify with that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there's one thing one of the topics that I bring with the students. Everyone can go and relate to art. Like the same thing, we love music. I love music. I don't know how to play the guitar, but I still love it.
Exactly. Music somehow is a bigger part of their lives in most cases, because it's so accessible and around you all the time. And you can talk about music to your friends, and everybody has that language about music, but not so much about art. But I also used it as an example of how you have to teach yourself to grow as an artist, in the same way that you grow in your tastes in music, because your taste in music grows. And as you learn more about art, your taste in art will grow and expand and become more embracing of all the different kinds of art that there are. Art's the same way. You find the thing that, like, makes you feel fizzy inside, and that's the thing that you learn how to talk about because you like it so much, just like music.
All the students, or all the people, that loves art, they had to actually add extra time into their life to actually give the opportunity to learn more about this type of art.
When you go to a concert or when you go to a sports game, there's the community thing. All the people there have a uh, reason for being there, and that feeds off of themselves. Nobody goes to an art gallery and goes, yay, when they see the art that's on the wall. I mean, they don't go as a group and everybody jumps up and cheers at the same time when they see it. And similarly, the production of art, the doing of art, is something that gets done privately, singularly. The artist works by themselves. They produce the art, they create the art, they learn about how to create the art, and then they present the art for somebody else to look at. And it's a different kind of occupation. And I think only the people who love looking at art are going to continue to love looking at art. I think that telephones, smartphones in particular now they are the art themselves. I love looking at my phone. I think it's so beautiful and magical. And I think that the way people look at things now is also altering. And you can look at it on your phone. You try as hard as you can. You in your generation and younger than you is out there on TikTok and Instagram and all the other social media, churning out imagery and information and contacts all the time. That's all one human being can do until you have this huge cluster of community that responds.
But one of the things too, Janet, to add to this is art. Basically, you say is private, and I really completely agree with you. I don't like when somebody's watching me, because that really, I can lose concentration, and that really doesn't allow me to be more technical, more methodical about the way I'm gonna do my artwork. But the deal is, you privacy do your artwork, and then later go out there and use your Instagram. Use it as a tool. It's free. Yes, of course, you have that mentality that social media is stealing stuff from you. Probably it is, but there is a give and take. You want it to be successful, you have to give back. Probably don't put risky information out there too as well. Don't do that.
Yeah.
You put fake information. Utilize the time in a way that is going to help to get better, and be more successful, because later if you need to sell a print, it's going to be much easier. You already build all these bridges.
You probably didn't think that way 15 years ago. You
Oh,
didn't
no.
think that way, when you were the age your students are now. It takes time, and that's for anything, to get to a level of skill and professionalism and the way you want something to be takes time.
I want to say from the bottom of my heart, Janet, thank you so much for, being a wonderful person. Helped me a lot. Thanks for being an amazing artist and being a friend right now and showing love for the arts and for me. And always gonna be appreciated. Gracias, gracias.
Well, thank you so much, Juan. It's been so great to be here to visit with you and to hear what you have to say. It's not often that a teacher gets feedback from a successful student who comes back and attributes all these wonderful things, which I think you must have made up, or you're thinking of somebody else when you when you're talking about them, because I remember your enthusiasm more than anything, and how grateful I was to have you for a student. So it's a two-way street. When you have a teacher who gives you what you are looking for, the teacher receives your attention just as much the same way. So it's been great. And it's nice to hear those things. You don't often get it. And I hope you get it from some student that you've done the same thing for.
Thank you so much.
Well,
I love you.
You're very, very welcome.
Gracias, gracias.
Thank you too. Thank you. It's been great.